Item 9, presentations. A, facility assessment. And we're going to go ahead and do the presentation first and then do the, there's one person signed up to speak, so we'll have them afterwards.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Micah, executive staff, and guests, I call on Susie Lackhorn. She's already there on the table. She'll be presenting Gordian for tonight's presentation.
Let me push the button real quick. Good evening. Tonight we're going to bring to you the results of our facility assessment last September. You approved, well, those of you who were here, approved a purchase order for us to go out and have Gordian come evaluate our buildings and our facilities. And so they're here tonight to give you a high-level summary of those results. So with us tonight, special thanks to Chad Hancock from Gordian, and also with Chad is Jeffrey Liu. So these guys have put in lots of hours, along with our maintenance and construction management department. So a big shout out to our staff who walked every square foot of the district practically. So they put in a lot of time and effort so that we could get some useful data to help us understand the status and the state of our facility. So I'm going to turn it over to Chad and chime in as needed. So you've got the clicker?
Got the clicker. Good to get started. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'll also reemphasize questions, please, as you have them. More than happy to field them. And then I have Jeff back here for more technical questions around the data if they do come up. But my name is Chad Hancock, as Susie mentioned. I'm here to present on behalf of Gordian, on behalf of NEISD, to recap the facility condition findings from the past year's work together. A little bit more about Gordian before we dive into the findings today to build a little bit more awareness of who we are as a company and the types of institutions that we serve. We are a global organization. We have facets of business across the world. We are heavily working within K-12 districts across the country, as well as higher education. Gordian sees ourselves, or we see ourselves, as an organization that supports institutions through all phases of the building life cycle, whether that's the planning of the budgetary process, which is what we supported NEISD with through our efforts, through the procurement of construction, or through the actual ongoing maintenance of facilities. We do this through leveraging our expertise, our insights, and our technology. As it pertains to the condition assessment work we performed across NEISD, expertise was in the form of our assessment teams and staff, as Susie mentioned, that walked all square footage of your district. Insights coming through our RS Means construction cost databases. So all of this information was priced in accordance to an industry standard of construction costing. And our technology is there for you to continue to leverage this information far after we leave and hand off the information to you. This information soon will be accessible to all facility staff members on our Gordian Cloud platform. For today's agenda, we will first start by a review of the district profile and the scope of assessed space. From there, we'll move into the need. So need will be viewed in various ways. When we say need, this is the capital funding needs coming due across the district. We'll touch on strategic planning. The purpose of today's presentation is introduce you to the data. Subsequent committees, as Susie will further elaborate on, will take the strategic planning process forward with continued support from Gordian. We'll finalize the presentation with a few key takeaways, and then I'll let Susie talk next steps. So first, within the district profile, we assessed about 12 million gross square feet of your school district. That assessment included building level reviews. We were in every mechanical room. We were on every roof. We were cataloging and categorizing your major capital equipment. So for example, each air handler was itemized. It was given an estimated replacement life and an estimated replacement cost. For the purposes of today's presentation, we've aggregated your district into clusters that you may be familiar with the exception of two new ones that came into the presentation today. That's the facilities cluster. It's where we fit some of the non-fitting other clusters such as the district level buildings, central office, adult community education, and then a separate cluster of what we've defined as other. This would include your parent central, ICSI, and then your Northeast Alternative Middle and High School. In addition to understanding the magnitude of the space that we assessed, it's critical to understand the age of the space that we assessed, as age is going to be one of the primary, if not the primary driver of capital needs coming due across the district. When we think about age, we think about it in several or in two different distinct ways. That age in which your buildings were built and the adjusted age that's taken place as a result of major renovation work. So on the left side of the screen here, we see your construction age, and then on the right of that, we see your renovation age. Each of these bars have 4 different age groupings to signal different types of demands or capital responsibilities in that space. We have spaces highlighted that's under 10 years old. We would define these as your honeymoon period, where there's very little capital requirements coming due in those spaces. Most of the work would be focused on preventive maintenance or operational activities. 10 to 25, this is where we start to see some of the shorter life cycle systems coming due and needing capital reinvestment. Shorter life cycle systems would be carpet. So carpet's going to last a little less than what a roof might last. And then we have space that now surpasses 25 years old as its own category, and then space over 50. We like to highlight those specifically here, as those are where we'll see risk evolve into the building itself. Because of the increased age, the life cycles in those spaces have come due and are likely needing to be replaced in the immediate future. As buildings surpass 50 years old, all life cycles have reached the end of their life, leading to potential building failure. It's not only a facilities question around will the buildings fail or will they not fail. There's the question, as we have buildings age, on do these currently fit the program demands of the spaces and the courses being taught there. As we think specifically about the NEISD data, now to take you back to that chart on the left side there, we see your construction age has been altered through major renovations, where at one point half of your campus was over 25 years old, meaning there was a significant amount of risk that existed across the district. As a result of major renovation work over the last decade plus, 65% of your space is now in 10 to 25 years old, with only 13% of your space being that high-risk category over 25 years old. As we think about what this means for capital planning and for capital funding requirements, we see that 65% of your space is the largest percentage of your overall profile here, meaning that the vast majority of your campus or your district buildings are needing some type of capital reinvestment needs to meet some of those early life cycle requirements. The positive and the advantageous position of your district is that you have very little high-risk space. Less than 15% of your district is over 25 years old, meaning that the priority across the district is to focus on future funding allocations and ensuring that we don't evolve into a high-risk district and that we're proactively prioritizing our funding needs. Another way to think about or to look at the age across the different clusters is showing construction age versus the relative renovation age. Legacy cluster, the oldest from a construction standpoint, but has had a significant amount of renovation work done over the past 25 years. All the way down to Johnson cluster, which is the youngest from a construction age, and because the needs of the space haven't quite dictated it, there are fewer renovations that have happened in that cluster. And so what's happened more or less is you've, again, consolidated much of your space in that 10 to 25 era. The challenge there being now that you're going to have a vast majority of your overall square footage aging at once, with capital needs coming due at once. And so again, back to the comment of the position now is to proactively get ahead of that and to prepare for that future state. Moving into the need profile now, I want to first just say, well, don't get sticker shock right now. I'm going to talk you through these numbers and let the group understand exactly what it is we're referencing here and what these numbers mean. So on the left is the grand total need. So 1.2 billion, this is the total need identified regardless of time frame. So these are projects that are currently due as well as projects that are due 25, 50 years from now. As we think about capital need it's important to put forward a planning horizon that's both meaningful in terms of we can procure the funds to address these, and it's reliable enough where we're not making plans off of need that may change in 5 to 10 more years. So because of that, we're segmenting out from that total 1.2 billion and focusing just what's coming due in the next 10 years. So this is what we define as the current need, so what's due now, and what's upcoming out to 2033. That number is 500 million. And to point to the footnote here on the slide, these costs, again, are coming straight from our RSMeans costing database. They do not include soft costs. So soft costs meaning that taxes on top of project work, engineering fees that may come as a result of project work, things that go into the above and beyond replacement of an item is not included in this either. Above and beyond example would be you have individual air conditioning units across the building. We priced it to replace those air conditioning units as they exist today. If you come to determine that those air conditioning units are not the right setup for that classroom, and you want to connect it to a central distribution system, that would be a different price, a different project. So those considerations should be top of mind as we go through this information today as well. We'll continue forward by just focusing on the total 10-year need. Again, that's 500 million of total 10-year need, both of what's current, also what's coming out to 2033. To be more granular and to identify what is current, so when we say current, these are needs that have passed their useful lives now or are not functioning correctly or as they should. That number is 141 million. The remainder of that 500 million is spread across the next 10 years in 3 timeframes A, B, and C, that represent 1 to 3 years out, 4 to 7 years out, 8 to 10 years out. What's important to keep in mind as we think about need on a replacement schedule is that this is not the place we would recommend to go to start picking projects from. You have current need, life cycle may have passed, but in some situations that may have been intentional. We may be allowing things to accrue need because there's other priorities across the district that may be showing signs of need 4 years out that we actually want to fund. So thinking about picking projects and identifying projects, those are 2 separate exercises. We're identifying those projects here. Committee's going to pick projects and put together those different types of requests. In addition to understanding magnitude of need, we want to be able to talk about where does this need exist across the district. So again, bringing clusters back into the conversation here to see exactly where that need is located and carrying forward the similar breakdown of need between current, again, that's what's due now, and then the next 10 years in the A, B, and C timeframes color-coded on the bars above. We can see that legacy cluster carries the most need, followed by Reagan, Roosevelt, Johnson, all the way down to the other grouping, which is a very small total relative to the whole. It's worth pointing out as we look at total need, clusters like Reagan and Roosevelt, somewhat similar total 10-year need, however, very different dynamics of future 10-year need, where Reagan, a lot of current, a lot of A, Roosevelt, mostly B and C timeframe need. So as we think about where the more urgent funding needs are, this helps to start painting that picture. What's also worth noting here as we think about campuses or districts, clusters would be the appropriate term, like Reagan, the younger when we think about the construction age. So the implications of some of those early life cycle systems coming due are what we start to see come through in the data. Some of the earliest and some of the systems that we start to see, and I'm going to transition slides here to talk about where some of those earlier life cycles are coming in through. HVAC need. A lot of campuses are set up with individual air conditioning units, which tend to have less than a 25-year life associated with those. That's a big part of what's driving needs in some of these seemingly younger spaces. Interior shell components on average 10 to 15 years, and fire safety systems. Fire safety systems, because of the technology involved in those, tend to last 15 years at most. And so as we think about the needs coming due, a lot of them are addressing first reinvestment cycles, and in some situations like legacy, actually second and third reinvestment cycles. As we look at this chart, just to break down more of what we're looking at here, I mentioned HVAC being one of the primary drivers of need. Here, about 160 of the total 500 million is an HVAC-related cost. When we say HVAC, that's your air handlers, that's your air conditioning units, that's your boilers, anything that produces hot or cold air to blow through your buildings. Interior shells, these are your floors, your walls, your ceilings. Plumbing is inclusive of water heaters, any kind of pump, and your bathroom renovations, your domestic, your supply piping. On the electrical side, this would be your main service distribution, your lights, any type of wiring within the buildings themselves. Exterior walls would be the doors, the windows, the roofs, and then fire protection here is fire sprinklers, fire safety systems, fire alarms. And then elevators is its own group there towards the right. To normalize this by cluster, because there's varying sizes across the group here, this gives us a better picture of where that need is on a comparable basis. So we see again, legacy, the most total need, also the most on a per square foot need. The facilities buildings, a cluster that is a combination of various buildings across the district, they're close to that legacy at $54 a square foot, with your lowest clusters being Madison and MacArthur. Now on to strategic planning, and here again is where we're going to start to talk concepts and talk some future planning of what this process will continue to evolve towards. To do this, I'm going to introduce a few concepts that we'll continue to leverage as a district. The first of those being net asset value. Net asset value is a measurement of the percent good of a building. It could be the measurement of the percent good of the district as a whole, of a cluster, of a campus. It's a scalable number that can be granular, it can be all-encompassing. The number itself is more than just good information or good context on relative condition one to the other. The net asset value also comes with an associated investment approach. And so when we think about a building that has 100% good, there are no capital needs coming due, or if there are, they're very little, we consider that building in the capital upkeep stage, meaning that we would want to fund renewing costs in that building to keep it so. We like to think about this chart as a return on investment monitor, where if we're going to put our money anywhere, we want to make sure it's going towards good buildings. As we move further down the investment, the net asset value grouping here, our decisions start to shift a little bit and the way we think about reinvestment evolves. As we move into buildings or clusters or campuses that are in the repair and maintain stage, we now think about grouping projects together more. There are likely more than just one-off components that need replacement. We're going to achieve economies of scale and better ROI by doing more at once. As we move down into the systemic renovation area, so now we're at 69 to 50% good of a building. And again, this is all relative to the building's replacement value. We are going to put the brakes on investing to some degree. We want to ensure that the money's going into a building that we can holistically renovate, hence the word systemic renovation. Likely all HVAC components have passed their life, so replacing one motor on one unit isn't quite going to solve the problem. In fact, that motor is likely going to need to be replaced again in 5 more years as we just put a Band-Aid on the issue. And then lastly, transitional. Here's where the building's capital need starts to approach the building's replacement value cost. So we're having conversations on, does this fit in our district? Are there different approaches to either divesting or reinvesting or repurposing this space? The good news for the district, and if I could have you leave with one slide, it would probably be this one. There's not a cluster across the board that's in that systemic renovation stage, or for a matter of fact, nothing goes even below, in this slide, 86% NAV. So largely a well-maintained, good condition district. The lowest here being legacy in the facilities, and they're just short of that capital upkeep stage. This number will change as those life cycles start to come in to the funding window. And so to go back to the earlier comment of the goal here is to create action around proactive funding and proactive planning into the facilities reinvestment. Another tool that will be leveraged to help the decision-making process ensure that we're picking the right projects is what we call project scoring. Project scoring is a numerical method that our team will go through with the district to determine priorities and numerical inputs that can be either higher weighted or the weights can be lowered to single in on the mission you have and ensuring that that aligns with the outputs of our project scoring matrix here. And so to summarize, before I pass it back to Susie, age is driving the capital investment requirements. Right now you have a few older facilities that are driving, that are past the end of their useful life in 13% of your campus or your district areas, while some of your seemingly younger facilities that have now reached 20 years old are needing their first reinvestment, their first major reinvestment fundings. Previous renovations have done a great job of offsetting current capital demands and has put the district in an advantageous position to pick their projects, not have projects pick you. So you're in the driver's seat of the future around capital planning, and then putting the plan in place is what needs to happen next. 500 million of capital needs have been identified over the next 10 years, 141 million of which are currently due. Didn't make this point on a previous slide, but there equates to $44 per square foot of capital need. So that 12 million square feet, about 500 million of identified need, that's where that 44 per square foot comes from, which is much lower than our database average, our national database average, that comes in around $93 a square foot. So again, this goes back to your younger campus, very little space in that highest risk category, and put you in this position. Most needs, HVAC related, air handlers, boilers, or chillers, any kind of distribution equipment. And then that lead cluster was the one that stood out as the highest per square foot need across the district at $55 per square foot relative to the 44 per square foot average. So next steps to Susie.
Thanks, Chad. I know 500 million sounds like a lot of money right off the bat, but bear in mind, we're talking about a need over the next 10 years. And you're also talking about making judgment calls as you go along. So that is very granular. Another thing to bear in mind is that as construction costs change, these are all based off of estimates. So these dollar amounts can change. They will change because the price of putting in a faucet today may not be the same as the price tomorrow. And sometimes we think those things go up, but actually as we've gone through this process, this number has actually come down. So as we evaluated things, and learned more about our systems, some of the numbers have come down as you actually investigate more. And so as you study and start looking in depth at things, you may learn maybe we don't need that, or maybe other changes can happen. And so there's a lot to be left from this point. This is the starting point. So let's talk about what our next steps are. We're going to start with 2 committees. They'll be organized to explore the investment priorities. There are 2 components to the work: thinking about the long-range needs of our students, building capacity and learning environment quality through the lens of efficiency, and the other thinking about where investments in our buildings should be prioritized. The committees would be bringing recommendations only, right? So they're not ultimately determining administration. Administration will determine what to bring forward based off of those recommendations and the needs identified, and then any action that the board needs to take. These concepts of building net asset value and project scoring are just tools that can help the committees get through looking at these projects and the work needed. They're great ways to help drive conversation and decisions. So the first committee we're going to start with is the Long Range Efficiency Committee, starting around September, and really can serve the district on an ongoing basis for lots of things. So it would be an advisory committee to the district and the board, and with responsibilities for looking at efficiencies across the district, leveraging that balanced district scorecard and those goals and objectives to do that work. There'll be fact-finding and advisory, but again, like I said, not building recommendations, not policy, right? And then after that work is done, the Facility Steering Committee will come in and serve as, again, another advisory committee using the district scorecard and leveraging anything that the Efficiency Committee can bring as a recommendation. And some of that work will overlap and work together, right? So how are the committees going to be formed? The Long Range Efficiency Committee, each trustee selects a parent and a community member residing within your single-member district. Superintendent will select parents, community members, and staff members, and then as they complete their work, you may have possible future board action based off of recommendations, right? Then the Facility Steering Committee, very similar, a parent from each trustee and a community member from your single-member district. And the superintendent will select parents, community members, staff members to fill out the rest of the committee. And again, basically parallels of each other, just doing slightly different work, leveraging our data, looking at where we're at with our facilities and our needs and efficiencies all across our programs and the district. I just started to ramble there at the end, I'm sorry. So that is the end of the presentation. Remember, this is the beginning of all the work. We will have access to lots and lots of data. So Gordian has taken the results, and I'm telling you, it's very granular. It's like plumbing and building A at campus, blah, blah, blah. And so it's massive. And you know how numbers are fun. So there's a lot in there to look at. And we'll be able to slice and dice the data in a lot of different ways. So it'll be very useful.
Susie, this
Yes.
this does not include buses, White Fleet,
Right.
technology, teacher computers. So that dollar amounts that we're talking about is facilities, not including vehicles and
Correct.
things of
We're
that
really
type.
talking about buildings. And so this is focused on our buildings.